Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are joining us from around the world. Welcome. My name is Meredith McCurdy. I am the program leader of Sports for Nature, and we are very excited to have you here for our first ever public webinar organized by Sports for Nature as we launch the Nature Sportified series. This series is in response to many questions we receive about various topics in an effort to bring together the wider sports community to discuss these nature-related topics and how it interacts with sports. So just some quick housekeeping information. So this session is being recorded and it will be shared on the Sports for Nature website as a recording. Please write your comments and questions in the Q&A and we'll do our best to address them as we go. And if you'd like to add captions, to the right here on the screen is a graphic about how you identify that with the More button at the top, and then identifying language and speech and showing live captions. So just a super quick overview of what is Sports for Nature. So we are a joint initiative of the International Union for Conservation of Nature, the International Olympic Committee, the UN Environment Programme, the UN Secretariat for the Convention on Biological Diversity, and Dona Botarelli Philanthropy. That's a lot of words, a lot of acronyms, but it really creates a strong foundation to co-develop Sports for Nature with the sports community. So we are here to enable the sports sector to take action for nature as part of their broader sustainability initiatives. A key pillar is our Sports for Nature framework, made up of 4 principles that sport organizations commit to. We currently have 106 signatories representing more than 30 sports all over the world. So we're very excited to launch the first webinar in our new Nature Sportified series. And we hope that we can help build the bridge between nature conservation and sports. So I'm very happy to hand over the microphone to my colleague Emmanuel, who will introduce you to this week's topic and all of our great speakers. So thank you again for joining.
Thank you very much, Meredith, for the introduction, and also a warm welcome to everyone from my side. It is my pleasure to see so many of you online, and as Meredith said, to be here today at the launch of this new series that we do under Sports for Nature. The topic we chose today is about the interlinkages between nature and climate. And you can see we titled today's session, Nature, Sports Ally in Tackling the Climate Crisis. We have a lot to cover because not only is it the launch of the new series, we also launched a new fact sheet under Sports for Nature about this topic. And of course, as you can see on the screen, I'm really excited that we have fantastic guests today to cover the interlinkages between nature and climate. We will start and kick off today's session with an introductory presentation by my colleague from IUCN, by Ali Rivzi, who's our head of the Climate Change and Energy Transition team at IUCN. And followed by that, we will have a quick introduction to this new publication I just spoke about. And then also, I think for me personally, extremely exciting, we'll also listen to 2 signatories of Sports for Nature. One that has joined from the very beginning as both a signatory and a partner, the International Olympic Committee, and then also a relatively recent signatory with Tottenham Hotspur Football Club. But first now, let me hand over to my colleague Ali, who will run us through how nature and climate are interlinked. Ali, over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ali Rizvi. As Emmanuel said, I'm Global Head of the Climate Change and Energy Transition team at IUCN. It's a pleasure to be talking with you all today on the first of the Nature Sportified webinars. And I'm so glad that we have the opportunity to discuss the intersection of nature, climate, and sport as the first discussion topic, because I see this as one of the most important challenges facing us today. The interrelation between climate change and the biodiversity crisis is a topic my team addresses on a daily basis, as our mission is to deliver integrated approaches to address both of these crises holistically. And I'm excited to discuss with you the key role that sport can play in creating and delivering these holistic solutions. Next slide. But first, let's talk about the issue at hand. While we often hear about the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis, we don't talk about how these two are two sides of the same coin. We are not facing two separate environmental emergencies. We are facing one singular planetary crisis with two deeply interwoven dimensions: climate breakdown and nature loss. These crises just don't coexist, they feed one another. When you negatively impact one, you negatively impact the other. When we lose nature, we accelerate climate change. And when the climate changes, we push more species and ecosystems to the brink of collapse and extinction. We therefore get a vicious feedback loop of one negatively impacting the other, and so on and so forth. I can give you many examples, but just one at this point. The classic example you will probably be most familiar with this is deforestation. Large-scale logging and burning of rainforest result in fewer trees to absorb carbon dioxide, which increases the atmospheric greenhouse gas emissions, which warm the planet, which in turn make a less hospitable climate for forests to live in. But there are hundreds and thousands of these feedback loops. Maybe another example would be the global reduction in pollinator populations such as bees. They look, just beautiful and other, but they have a huge role, as many of you must already be knowing that their decline is driven by climate change as well as other factors such as habitat loss, pesticide and pollution. Fewer bees mean fewer plants get pollinated, including the crops that supply the food we eat. As harvests shrink, food prices increase, farmers lose income, and malnutrition risk rises, including for you and me. Meanwhile, plant growth that stores carbon is diminished, resulting in increased climate change. And hopefully we can see from these examples that these are not just environmental issues, they are directly impacting and harming human health, our livelihoods, our economies, and global stability. As you know, when, due to so many economic migration, they are taking place, and climate and nature has a great role in playing that. In times like this, I think we all are getting a better understanding of how damaging global destabilization can be to our daily lives. Next slide, please. The science has never been clearer or more urgent. Through the UN system, we have assembled two huge bodies of scientists to provide us with the best available knowledge on this: the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, and the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. Next, Push, can you, yeah. These bodies are absolutely clear. We are losing biodiversity, and we are looking into that how this temperature rise will in return will has an impact on human well-being. And these two scientific bodies are united in their call. We cannot solve one without the other. Rather, we have seen that while resolving one issue, we create many other issues if we don't have an integrated approaches. Climate change is not the future threat. It is already, we all know, is destabilizing ecosystems. Recent wildfires in California, drought in Horn of Africa, etc., are the recent examples. Next slide, please. These impacts are cascading across landscapes and directly affecting communities, economies, and indeed sports. Sport depend on stable climate and healthy environments, from snow and water to clean, cool air. I don't need to tell you about all the challenges that sport people face when environmental conditions are not right. I'm sure many of you are already grappling with the human and economic damages caused by heat stress, by extreme weather events, by dried out soil, by melting snow, by air pollution, by toxic algal blooms, to name just a few. Perhaps you hadn't made the link between these issues and the planetary crisis, but let's be clear that this is the cause, and it is a direct threat to sports around the world. we are heading towards scenarios that do not allow sports as we know them. And no sport or country is immune from this. Next slide, please. Let's now look towards the solutions. We have a global mandate to reduce emissions and respond to climate change, established in 2015 in the Paris Agreement, and we have another global mandate that sets clear targets to halt and reverse biodiversity loss in the Global Biodiversity Framework, which was agreed in 2022. These two frameworks speak to each other, and they do need to do that in a very integrated and holistic manner. And they do recognize that the central role of integrated climate action is so critical. Many governments, businesses, and cities are already stepping up, but we must move from commitment to implementation very fast. We are not on track to achieve the goals in either the Paris Agreement or the Global Biodiversity Framework, but momentum is now building and nature is a big part of that. Increasingly, we are aligning our goals to be joint climate nature goals, whether it be on finance, policy, or action. But to achieve these goals, we need leadership and partnerships from across and every sector. In particular, we need those sectors that cut through the everyday person sector like sport. Sport is global, it's emotional, it inspires billions. Sport venues, clubs, and events can champion and implement integrated climate nature actions from local conservation projects to sustainable procurement. And it's great to hear about some of the successes that Sports for Nature partners have already achieved in this regard. For example, through the Ocean Race Learning Program and the Sustainable Procurement Practice at the Olympic House and Olympic Museum in Lausanne. Let's build on these good news stories by embedding climate and nature into sports operations and values. The sector can lead in championing solutions, changing mindsets, and rallying action. This is why initiatives like Sports for Nature are so vital. They connect the dots between global goals and grassroots actions. One important message I want to stress is that this is not just about reducing the carbon on biodiversity footprint of sport. That's no longer enough. This is also about adapting to the risks that are already affecting sport. Nature can help us in this. Nature will not only help us sequester carbon, but it will also help alleviate heat stress. It can clean our air and water. It can improve the nutritional value of our foods. It can moderate risk from natural disasters. We can use nature to reverse those vicious feedback loops I described earlier, because if we protect, conserve, restore, and sustainably manage nature, we can create positive feedback loops. Nature can help sport become a more resilient sector for the long term. To close, I want to say that the task ahead is immense, but the opportunity is greater. Nature is not just a victim of climate change, it's also one of our greatest allies. The sports community is uniquely placed to lead by example and inspire change by integrating climate and nature into operations and storytelling and into our very societies and culture. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ali, for this fantastic presentation. Really appreciate you joining us today to give us the overview on, of course, how climate and nature are interlinked and also how sports are connected. I really liked also, and I hope that's good news for everyone on the call, you mentioned negatively impacting one, negatively impacts the other. We can flip it and say positively impacting one will also positively impact the other. So I think that's a good way to go forward. I know, Ali, you have to jump off the meeting soon, but we have people also from Ali's team today with us. So for all of the participants today, if you have questions on what you just heard Ali presenting, please add the questions into the chat and we'll make sure we can address them during the meeting. For the next segment of today's webinar, I also want to, I think, build on a lot of points that Ali mentioned today. And one of them was the impact on sports. And if we look at it a bit from a different perspective, also what kind of impact sports can have on climate and nature. On the slide that Ali showed, you saw, of course, how sports are directly impacted by the crisis, but we do know that sports can also have their own impact, and in fact, they have a substantial impact. But as Ali mentioned at the very end, the opportunity is also immense. I put on the slide today, you see the cover of the latest publication we launched under Sports for Nature. It is called Nature Action, Sport's Best Offense and Defense Against the Climate Crisis. And on the right side of your slide or of your screen, you see an illustration that is also part of this publication. It might be a bit small, it might be difficult to read, so I hope that's a good incentive for you to either scan the QR code, or in a second, I will also upload the link to the publication in the meeting chat for you to have a look. The publication, of course, is very much, again, about the link on these topics on nature, climate, and sports. Also because we got so many questions from our Sports for signatories on how these topics are interconnected. I want to quickly highlight the illustration that you see, because as also Ali mentioned at the very end of his remarks, just focusing on greenhouse gas emissions is not enough. We do know that sports have multiple impacts on the environment, on nature and climate, and I just want to highlight a quick few, especially with a lens on nature and on biodiversity. From my perspective, if there's one take-home message for everyone today is also learning about what the key pressures are on nature and on biodiversity. Because with this knowledge and with this message, you will be immediately able to see the link, how a sporting event could be related to these pressures. The first one is the one we're talking about today, climate change. Think about extreme weather, think about new temperature settings where it's difficult for animals, for plants to adapt to, and they cannot longer exist in the new climate. But of course, also extreme weather events that can immediately, from 1 minute to the next, destroy entire ecosystems. The next one, the second one, and also the most relevant one and most important one is change of land use. And you have it illustrated also here on the slide. Think about temporary venues that are being set up for sporting events. Think about space that is created so that fans can travel, etc. All these things are really important in terms of biodiversity protection. So a lot can be done on where facilities are taking place, at what time to also make sure to avoid any migratory paths of species. So a lot can be done on this front as well. The next one, you see it, I hope you can read it, but it's at the very bottom of the illustration, is about pollution. Of course, that's an immediate threat to animals. Think about, it could be in the forest, could be in the ocean, but of course, any kind of pollution, plastics, chemicals can endanger their lives. Next, we have the resource consumption. That is a big threat for biodiversity, just because, of course, sporting events and events in general can be very resource intense to put them together. And finally, the last major threat for biodiversity are invasive alien species. Think about the travel that is associated with major competitions, especially also global ones where we have people, fans and equipment traveling across the globe and then bear the risk of also transporting invasive species. There, the issue is that these species that are being introduced in a new ecosystem outcompete the local ones so that they cannot access the resources they need to prosper. And of course, that's also a major threat. So maybe in the headlines that you see about events where I think very often the focus is on the carbon emissions related to travel, I think it's also good to keep in mind travel also has other impacts, including the one and the possible threat on invasive species. But I told you I wanted to focus on another point that Ali mentioned, not just on the impacts, but also looking forward and looking to the solutions. And for this, of course, we have featured some of them in the publication as well, but I think it's much more interesting today. We have signatories of the Sports for Nature initiative with us, and we can directly hear from them what kind of actions sports organizations are taking both for nature and for climate. So with this, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Marcus Perry, who's a sustainability manager at Tottenham Hotspurs FC. Thanks, Marcus, for turning on the camera. Perfect. And also Lies van Long, corporate sustainability senior manager at the International Olympic Committee. I will in a second also stop sharing my screen so that you see our speakers better. But I would like to start with you today with just a quick introductory question to please introduce yourself and share a little bit with our participants today. What does it mean to work on environmental sustainability, on climate and nature within your organization? Maybe Lies, you can start, please.
Thank you, Emmanuel, and good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Really happy that there are so many participants for this webinar today. So I'm part of the IOC sustainability team, where I've been working for the last 9 years. I started at the IOC when it was the time of the development of the first IOC sustainability strategy, and it has given rise to many projects and actions since then. And we are currently a team of 4 people managing all these projects and action plans. Maybe I give you also a little bit of introduction on how we work on sustainability at the IOC, because that will help you understand maybe the example that I will provide you afterwards. So at the IOC, in terms of topics, we are, of course, working on nature and climate. These are 2 important aspects of the strategy. The third one being the circularity and resource management. But in practice, all of this is very much linked together. And then we have different roles at the IOC. So we have a strategy structured around 3 spheres of responsibility. The first one being the IOC as an organization, which is a small scope, which is basically our day-to-day operations, where we want to be credible and walk the talk and being exemplary. So it's about the daily activities in our offices in Lausanne and Madrid with about 1,000 people. Second sphere is the IOC as owner of the Olympic Games, which is the most visible part that you probably all know, where we are working to define the concept of the games, we elect the host cities, and then we have contractual requirements with the host cities. And then most of our job is about monitoring the work of the organizing committees and helping them achieve their ambitions. And it's really for us to make sure the games are an example of sustainability and a catalyst for the territories to be achieving their sustainability goals. And the third sphere that we are working on is the Olympic movement. So we are the leader of the Olympic movement. So we work with sports federations, national Olympic committees, athletes, to help them integrate sustainability in how they work, their operations, their events. And here it's something we do all year long, everywhere in the world. And it's mostly about influencing through trainings, guidance, and developing also frameworks like the Sport for Nature, and also providing funding. And here, as leader of the Olympic movement, our ambition is to use the power of sport to accelerate action on climate, on nature, among other topics. So this is to give you a short introduction of how we work at the IOC.
Thank you very much, Lies. And we will come back to the spheres of responsibility. I think that's really interesting to see how you're active on these very, very several fronts. Marcus, now to you. How is it working climate, environment, climate, nature at a professional football club?
Yes, hello everyone, and thank you so much for having us. My name is Marcus Parry. I am the Sustainability Manager for Tottenham Hotspur Football Club. We are based here in North London. Tottenham Hotspur is recognised as the Premier League's greenest club, and we have been for the last 5 years, but we can't stand still, and we recognise the enormous responsibility that we have. My role is to continue the club's journey on the race to zero, and we strongly recognise the interconnection between the climate crisis and the nature crisis, and as we'll talk about later, how that's communicated through the club. Football is at the heart of what we do, but as a lot of you might be aware, we've now hosted a whole range of events, whether that be world-class concerts, with the only bespoke NFL stadium outside of America, and rugby games as well. So with that comes incredible opportunities, but also another huge responsibility and a much bigger audience that we have to try and inspire and help bring on our journey for the Race to Zero. Last year, to try and cement all of that work together, we brought in a third-party accreditor, so ISO 2012-1 for sustainable event management. And that's been a really clear goal for us in ensuring that we have someone else who's coming in, looking at our practices, and as we update our environmental policy and our objectives, making sure we're doing the best we possibly can for the people, not just in our communities, but in the wider world, and also for nature and for climate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marcus. And I would like to follow up with you on what you said also on inspiring others, because I think that's also something we have heard from Ali about the true power of sports to inspire others to take action. And of course, also that's a big part of Sports for Nature. For the ones who might not be familiar yet with the Sports for Nature framework, we have 4 key pillars we work on, them being nature protection, restoration, procurement, and then also education and communication. And I would like to ask you, Marcus, how is it that in the sports club, how do you inspire the people working in the club? How do you communicate also internally about nature and climate and the importance to take action, not tomorrow, but today?
Yeah, fantastic. I'll talk about internal, but to preface as well, something I didn't mention, obviously we know football is the most watched sport in the world. Then you have the Premier League, which is the most watched league within football as well. So that outreach we have, I think there's on average 600 million fans watch the Premier League per match. So we use the stadium to advertise messaging around where we're using 100% renewable energy, the recycling facilities we have. Nearly 90% of our desserts here are fully plant-based. We have vegan range on every single kiosk, but we take the stealth approach where we focus on having fantastic tasting food, and we don't advertise it as being plant-based, but we take the nature benefits and the climate benefits from how we source that food. But internally, so we have a very comprehensive staff induction program ranging from all our stewards, so everything you can imagine in the club. We have around 800 employees here. And within that staff induction program, it goes over 2 days. First day is in the stadium, second day is at the training ground. And sustainability has an hour slot within that. And we present our framework of showing how we have circularity sitting there at the heart, and how keeping products and materials in use, eliminating waste, both drives down emissions, but also is positive to nature, to try and show everyone that interconnection that we have committed to the race to zero. We have said we'll be net zero by 2040. We cannot achieve that without driving down our emissions, being careful with our resources, and having a net gain in biodiversity. We were also the first club to go out and give this training to our players as well. So that's incredibly hard to break into, but we all know the power that players have. We've given the voice. Everyone always quotes Ronaldo moving the bottle and bringing in water. But what we did is we got time in with not just the academy, but the women's first team and the men's first team as well. And we have fantastic advocates within those players to talk about these issues. Something I think I was going to touch on as well is at the training ground, we've tried to make things visible for the players. So we have these biodiversity monitoring systems at the training ground, and they look exciting. It gets players' attention, and these are right in front of the pitches that they're training on. So players are walking past this all the time and seeing these devices which listen to pollination activity. So then it gets the players talking about these issues and the players asking about questions. And that's something that really is a strength of ours as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. And really, thanks for sharing these examples. Awesome to hear that sustainability, climate, and nature are talked about across the whole organization, and also how you manage to involve the players. Now, Lise, I wanted to ask you, how is it at the International Olympic Committee? How is the communication and the awareness raising being done at the IOC?
So at the IOC, I can give you a few examples. Then I could give you also some examples related to the Olympic movement. But if we start with our own operations, one of the most efficient ways we have found to raise awareness especially on climate, is to implement carbon budgets for travel, which is our main emission source. And it has obliged everyone up to senior management to really look at what a ton of carbon represents, and to include this aspect in their travel decisions, and more widely in all the decisions we make on how we organize our events. So with this system of carbon budgets, and with a number of other actions, we have managed to reduce the carbon footprint of the IOC by almost half since 2016. So we are quite proud of having achieved this and really being able to be aligned with the Paris Agreement goal. Then another area which is very important also to raise awareness is through procurement, because it touches many people. And this is usually one of the main levers you have to really contribute to the climate and nature goals. One category that is particularly important and has impacts on climate and nature is the food and catering. So that was already mentioned by Marcus, but here at the IOC, so we have restaurants, we have a canteen, we have a restaurant open to the public at the museum. We also host many institutional events where we hire catering companies. So by setting minimum requirements on the sourcing of food, on the prevention of food waste, and on also the minimum percentage of vegetarian meals, we can influence the supply chain and also reduce our impact. It's also a good topic for communication. It's quite tangible for colleagues or for event participants to understand what we're trying to achieve and how their choices also can contribute to the targets. And for example, at the IOC in our canteen, we have managed to reduce the carbon footprint per meal by approximately 40%, working with our catering partners and implementing these sorts of actions on the choice of food and food waste prevention and increasing of vegetarian meals. So this is for the IOC. Now for the Olympic movement, well, as you know, we took part in the creation of some frameworks. One of them is Sport for Nature with IUCN. The other one is Sport for Climate Action, which you may have heard of as well. So they are complementary to each other. So for us, it's a way of working with the signatories to help them achieve ambitious goals on climate and nature, and to do this in a collective manner because it's much more powerful. So our goal is to increase the number of signatories for these two frameworks. On the Sport for Climate Action framework, we have approximately 300 participants today, approximately 1/3 from the Olympic movement. And on the Sport for Nature, I think there are about 90 signatories, including 40 from the Olympic movement. So, and if I stay on this Sport for Nature framework, so we are involved in different ways, and in particular, we are co-chairing the working group on procurement, where we try to help participants understand the risks to nature in the supply chain of sports. And we are also developing some guidance. So we have produced some fact sheets on sustainable sourcing, covering the key materials or activities that are found in sporting events. So we have fact sheets on catering services, gifts and promotional products, sport equipment suppliers, wood products, and I think now also working on a fact sheet on the rubber in sports and sports equipment. So that's one of the ways that we're helping the signatories implement concrete actions to protect nature.
Thank you very much, Lise. And I have an immediate follow-up question to you. Now we covered already 2 spheres of responsibility. I have a question about the 3rd sphere of responsibility that you mentioned, also about the Olympic Games. Marcus also has mentioned already at Tottenham Hotspurs, of course, they host a lot, but of course also the Olympic Games have an incredible size. And I wanted to ask you a bit, because I think also many probably on the call today have followed the Games last year in Paris. And I wanted to ask, how was the strategy on climate and nature? What has been done? What has worked really well at the Paris Olympics in this regard?
Yeah, thank you for asking this question on the Games. So we are quite happy with the success of the Paris Games in terms of sustainability. They really did a great job. As IOC, we set the minimum requirements on different topics, including on climate and biodiversity, by asking to have plans to protect the climate, to reduce carbon emissions, to protect biodiversity, etc. But for Paris 2024, they really try to set ambitious targets and have very detailed reduction plans and protection plans. So on climate, they managed to cut the carbon footprint of the games by half compared to previous edition of the games. So they did that by implementing actions on many different topics. First one is to build as less as possible. So they really used a maximum of existing infrastructure. I think it was around 95% of existing infrastructure. And then they worked on sustainable transportation, waste prevention, circularity, food, renewable energy, on various topics that helped them achieve this great result. And on nature and biodiversity, so there were lots of legal requirements, but they really tried to go even further by really identifying all the risks related to each venue, so that there are many risks such as the disturbance of protected species, damages to the trees, to the water quality, damages to the soils, because you have crowds walking, you have vehicles also that can impact the soil, all the risks of spillage, even also the light pollution at night. So these are the types of risks that they really evaluated for all the venues. And then they took a number of protection measures. For example, they implemented 1,700 tree protections. They protected the equivalent of 20 rugby pitches of an area equivalent to 20 rugby pitches of protected soil to avoid compaction or contamination. 6 kilometers of habitat protection in different venues. And they really also developed a methodology that can be reused by future event organizers. So they really published also the methodology that they used to evaluate the venues and have protection plans. An important aspect also that they worked on is the food vision, so which contributed to both the carbon objective and the biodiversity objective. So their ambition was to reduce the carbon footprint per meal by half compared to a normal French meal. So they managed to do that, and also to increase significantly the proportion of veggie meals that were served to the public, and also, of course, to prevent food waste and donate or recycle all the food waste that was produced. So these are just a few examples of how they worked on these two topics and what types of achievements they have.
Thank you very much. Really an incredible achievement. So congratulations also on that. I think the bar is very, very high also now for future Olympic Games. Quickly, Marcus, before I have another question for you, I just wanted to also tell the audience again, if you have any questions on what you hear from Lise, what you hear from Marcus, and also what you have heard before from Ali, please feel free to add them into the chat. I haven't seen them yet, but happy to collect. We really want to also then allocate enough time for those. But Marcus, I had a question for you based on what Lise mentioned on actions taken on the venues. And you spoke earlier today, you installed biodiversity mapping instruments and measurement instruments. So help us picture this. What is it that the players walk by? What kind of information and data could you collect?
Yeah, thank you. So we have two different biodiversity systems. One listens to the dawn chorus of birds, and that's a very snazzy device. I have to be careful not to mention names at the moment, but that sits on trees, listens to the dawn chorus, and then it's a simple listening box that produces data back into a nice simple dashboard for us, and it shows the activity of birds that we have in the area, a fantastic biodiversity indicator. The ones where we have 15 of them around the site, these listen to bees, and it gives you a percentage of the day of every time that bee has flown past that particular area. Again, feeds back onto a nice simple dashboard, so we can monitor, is there something that we have done in one particular area of the training ground that has seen an increase in activity versus if we decide to change an area and we see a drop-off in activity. And then working with ecologists on that data to try and bring it to life more. So these were installed last July. We won awards for Biodiversity Projects of the Year, but it's not something that are one and done. It's now, how do we use that information to continue to learn and develop? And the site is ever expanding. So then any data that we gain from there, we can then take to other sites again to have a baseline load of, like you would with anything, of a target, measure and act system. So it's a conversation starter for players and gets people looking at what we're doing, but it's giving us really cool data. But it's just super simple to get a lot of these. When you have a biodiversity impact assessment, it's usually one and done. Someone will come on site, they'll give you a ranking, and then you're in the dark again. But this gives us real-time data to be able to continually assess our impact.
Thank you very much, Marcus. And of course, I'm already picturing when you have a lot of biodiversity present, is the practice session more productive? That would be a great story to tell. So let's see. Is there interest from other clubs on this, Marcus? Is that something Tottenham also shares with other clubs in the Premier League?
Yeah, we've been very open about it. So I spent 17 years in the retail industry. I worked for the John Lewis Partnership, and this was technology that I had seen out on dairy farms. It's very big in the retail space. Regenerative agriculture conversations ongoing. So no sports organizations yet had used this tech, which I found surprising. So yeah, we've since last year, once we announced it, it's trying to make it more visible and talk about it more, what we're doing, and we'll happily set people up with the companies who's willing to do it. Because yeah, it's fantastic. And the club is always looking for innovative ways to improve. Like I say, you can't stand still in this space. There's an awful long way to go in the journey. So anyone who has exciting technology that can bring these issues to life and make our life easier is something that we're always looking to work with.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Lise, I wanted to ask you a question also when we talk about innovative ways, exciting technology, but also then what Ali mentioned on, let's say, the classic example, risk of deforestation. How can forests contribute to positive action on nature and climate? And I know also the IOC is very active in this space. Can you share a bit with our participants today what the IOC is doing? And as you spoke about the spheres of responsibility, what the movement is doing on forests.
Yes, sure. So in fact, we launched a project which was initially for the IOC to compensate our carbon footprint. So we launched the Olympic Forest Project, which is a tree planting reforestation project in Senegal and Mali, which is an initiative that is part of the Great Green Wall of Africa. And the goal is to plant trees, and it has been in place since 2022, I think. And to generate carbon credits, which are certified according to the Plan Vivo standard. It's a standard which also has big components on socioeconomic benefits for the community. So it's a project that started with an ambition related to carbon sequestration and carbon compensation, but now it's really something that is also a great project in terms of improving the socioeconomic conditions for this region and the fight against desertification. So it's turned out to be very inspiring also for our stakeholders of the Olympic movement, and they wanted to replicate these types of forest or to be part of this forest project. It was quite complicated to extend the project. It's quite a challenging one with lots of risks and it's a challenging environment as well. So what we decided is to create a network of Olympic forests. It's actually not only forests, but it's a network of nature projects that our stakeholders from the Olympic movement can contribute to. So they can initiate nature projects, which can be biodiversity protection projects. It can be mangrove restoration, wildlife corridors, or things like that. So they came up with different ideas, and we set some criteria to be recognized as the project that is part of this Olympic Forest Project. So it's a way of extending the work on nature, but with different types of projects that contribute to nature. So we have this criteria. If the projects meet the criteria, then they are recognized as Olympic Forest Network projects. And we have today 6 projects that were proposed by national Olympic committees in different parts of the world, with really great examples of different ways that you can protect, enhance biodiversity.
Thank you very much, Lise. I like how you highlighted it also then the connection to the local community, and it ties in very well with a question we have received from Ernest in the chat. And also quickly to others, if you have more questions to Lise and Marcus, please feel free to add them there. Marcus, I passed on immediately the question we got from the chat, and it is about, I don't know if you see it, but I can quickly read it out. It is, to what extent are your sustainability strategies at Spurs aligned with the targets and strategies of your local authorities? How much do you run your strategies and ideas by the local authorities to make sure that they would eventually contribute to a greater cause relevant to the local community?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. Yeah, we work incredibly closely with Haringey Council and the London Mayor. We're involved in lots of projects with them. Part of the reason why we have so much involvement with them is because of where we sit in this heart of the Tottenham regeneration. So Tottenham historically is a very deprived area of London and within the country, and there's a 20-year regeneration project that Tottenham is sitting at the forefront of. So all those conversations of how we work within the community are constant conversations. That also feeds into where I said at the start, where we're having an additional events. Part of that ties into agreements that we have with local authorities that in order to host those events, what are we doing for the community? There's lots of work in terms of socioeconomic benefit that we've provided to the community, but trying to bring to life these issues on nature and climate. We have a separate arm, our Tottenham Hotspur Foundation, so they're active in the community, do a lot with food banks, etc., and talking about the importance of food and nature. Yeah, there was something another point I was going to say on that. Oh yes, so like litter in the area, that's what really gets the community. That's the big issue that they've talked about the most. So that's another tie into what Lisa's talked about as well. On the products that we're procuring, we have making sure that we're removing single-use plastics. We've gone to seaweed-based packaging where we can. Reusables, we're saving around 2.5 million cups through reusables now at our stadium. So constantly anything that we can do to show our community that we don't want to be bringing fans here who are then going to take materials out, litter the streets, and that we have an active program, because that's what gets the community's attention as well. You want them to know that we're trying to do the best for the local area. So yeah, absolutely, the strategy is aligned to locals.
Wonderful. Thank you, Marcus. You mentioned procurement. We have a procurement-related question in the chat. Lise, there's a question about the procurement fact sheets. I know many of them are upcoming, but maybe also some information for you where they can be accessed, because the question is if they are available also to those who are not Sports for Nature signatories.
I need to check on this. Yeah. Thank you for the question. It's a very good one. We'll answer. Yeah, we'll find a way to provide the information to the participants after the webinar.
Perfect. Thank you, Lise. And I can add also from the Sports for Nature side, we have an upcoming fact sheet also on procurement. We will upload it on our Sports for Nature website. I will also add the link later, but there it is available to everyone, not just Sports for Nature signatories. Now, Marcus, a question for you, because I liked very much earlier when you said biodiversity assessment, sometimes the issue can be that you do it once and then not a lot of action is following, or not a lot of follow-up is happening. So I wanted to ask you, what are you most excited about? What's on the horizon for Tottenham Hotspurs? You mentioned some of the projects you're on already, but tell us, share a bit with us, what's coming, what gets you excited when you talk with your colleagues about biodiversity and nature?
What gets us excited is on seeing this work that's happening out in the wider space, seeing the engagement here and knowing that, say, when people are talking about becoming net zero, they need to be recognizing that nature holds equal weight in that, and when you're driving down emissions. The food is probably, as Lise talked about, that's what gets me the most excited because of the reach that we have to fans, and you've got to make you don't want fans to be coming here and feel like they're being lectured on issues. You've got to make it exciting for fans. And food is such a fantastic touch point. So if you can show people that you're working with suppliers who will focus on regenerative practices, local suppliers, sourcing vegan food, but making vegan food tasty and exciting to the point that people don't question whether it's vegan or whether it contained animal products, making sure then that the what we package that food in is either reusable. So we have a mission to eliminate single-use plastics from the club. Using Nopla packaging is something that I talked about. So Nopla, we're an Earthshot Prize winner. That's a seaweed-based packaging. A lot of bio-based packaging is incredibly hard to then compost or recycle all the claims that they say that they can do. Whereas with Nopla, we've ran all the testings through, and that can go through into an anaerobic digestion capability as well. So moving it further up the food waste hierarchy. Ideally, we don't want to have food waste full stop, but food waste is inevitable and coming from fans. So this season, working on moving to starting to capture fans' food waste is the big thing we've been trying to unlock. Very difficult to do when you have 62,000 fans in the stadium who are quickly popping out at halftime and then going back into the stadium. We know they don't have time to think or what bin things are going into. So we've been working to develop a system where you can have a point of having a wet system and a dry system. So the food, the packaging, including the stirrers that we use, everything is then can go to that same facility to be processed correctly as food waste. So that's a big project that I'm really excited to be able to get underway. And I say hopefully towards the end of the season we'll have that in place. It's those touch points where, say, everyone's probably seen our concert calendar at the moment as well. It feels like every day we're announcing a new concert here. We have upwards of 30 additional events on top of the football calendar. So many new people who are coming to our stadium and those opportunities to excite people more. Yeah, that's what keeps us excited.
Wow. I'm happy as a football fan. I'm happy for Sports for Nature. I'm happy for you that you have such a long list to be excited about. Marcus, you get a quick break, but I have more questions for you in the chat. But also, please, if you have more questions for Lise as well, please add them in as well. Marcus, I give you a second to quickly read. Otherwise, I can also read them out for everyone. But Lise, the same question to you. You looking forward. I think everyone on the call here followed also the election of the new IOC president. So congratulations to that. What do you expect? What do you get most excited about working on climate and nature, looking a bit into the future?
There are lots of things happening this year at the IOC. So it's a very special year with our new president who has just been elected. And we are really looking forward to working with her on sustainability. You may be aware that there was a group of 400 Olympians who wrote to the presidency candidates to request them to put the care of the planet as a priority issue. So we are really happy that so many athletes decided to really to address the candidates and to put this topic really in the spotlight. So our president, our future president, replied that it was a good initiative from the athletes and that it was really important that they raise their voice to amplify these important messages, and that she would welcome a meeting with these athletes on the climate, and that she would make it a priority to have this discussion with the athletes. So we are very much looking forward to the discussion, and we are getting prepared for this. And more widely, this year we are in the process of updating our strategy, which we are doing every 4 years. So it's always an interesting time when we consult many stakeholders to see what are the next big topics that we have to address. So it's I think we will continue to work more or less on the same topics as before, like climate, nature, circularity, but trying to have measurable targets as much as possible as we progress. Also, maybe working a bit more on the adaptation side, which is becoming really critical. So this is overall a very interesting year, and we are looking forward to the next discussions.
Thank you. Same with what I said to Marcus, really exciting to see how, yeah, the engagement you have in sports and sustainability and how much passion and activities there are. So that's really fantastic. Marcus, your break is over. You might have seen the questions in the chat, but we have Eva, who is as excited as I am about your biodiversity measurement devices. So I quickly read it out. Question to Marcus. Great to hear about various biodiversity-related measuring devices. I am curious about the policies or activities that the club has designed based on these ongoing measurement. Could you please expand on this? Thank you.
Amazing question. So we work with the two different systems, and then they have two different groups of ecologists who are working on those systems. We don't pretend here now to have all of the answers, and I think that key point to make is there's so much value in just trying something and making a start and accepting that you won't have all the answers straight away. Those devices were set up at the end of last summer. The plan is working with those ecologists to try and get a full season's worth of data, and then how we can formulate that into policies and plans to bring things to life. On the training ground, we already have policies in place to remove, so there's no chemical pesticides, we use nematodes, there's removing microplastics from different equipment we have, measuring the soil biology. There's lots of work that's been ongoing there for the past decade. What we really want to do is work out how to bring that data to the urban environment. So you expect all of this stuff to be happening out in at the training ground, but what learnings can we get once we finish the season, get this data, work with the ecologists and start bringing people over to the stadium? And can we set up these systems around the stadium and the landscapes we have around the stadium? So no clear policies yet, but the pathway to develop those policies, and that's how I'll push to those two companies that we're working with to say, look, I want a way of bringing this to life and how we can implement this into policies. Because of course, the real impact is, yes, you've got all the fans around here in the community, improving quality of life for the community. But how do you get a policy written in like you have with carbon targets for all your suppliers that you work with to get them to start setting some measurable targets as well, whether that's food is probably the easiest entry point as well. But if we're producing any goods from cotton, is it responsibly sourced cotton, etc.? There's so much, but we need just that grounding base load of data first to be able to then start shaping those policies. It's not a finished article yet.
Thank you very much, Marcus. And now you already shared a bit also the challenges ahead. And I also, Lise, I want you to bring you in here as well on what do you see as one of the key challenges working on climate and nature? What would you share with the participants today that you say like, oh, that was something we struggled with, but we can also overcome it, and that's how I would do it? Can you share a bit your recommendations with the audience?
Thank you, Emmanuel. We have many challenges, of course, working in this area. One I can mention is the challenge of convincing people on how we can do more with less, emitting less carbon, using less materials, reducing our damages to nature. It all seems very boring. It all adds many constraints. So we are always seen as people bringing new constraints. So the real challenge is how we turn all these constraints into opportunities. But we know that with the power of sport, we can do lots of things, and it's really where we have to work hard to be able to propose new ways of doing things that are more sustainable, but are seen as very attractive to people and that generate positive emotions, so that people can really project themselves into new ways of doing things which are less impactful. So I think the Paris Games did a good job at trying to go this way, to make sustainability an integral part of the project so that people see it in a positive way, and it's rather than being a boring exercise. So I think it's a good start, and we'll try to build on this for the next editions.
Thank you. I very much like, that's a very good message to end on the way from the boring subject to the positivity to the passion. I do see in the Q&A, we also have a question from Mike, a challenging question. He says, we is, I think, global sustainable sport. Great to have you on the call, Mike. We recently highlighted the variation between carbon emission reporting between Arsenal and Tottenham, the two football clubs. How can sport ensure that their biodiversity reporting is consistent and comparable so that fans and brands can understand who is doing what? So a very challenging question, because I think for everyone on the call, you might also know we don't have one single number on biodiversity to measure that we can say, this is where we started at, this is the number we want to double, triple, or even half. So that's a challenge, Mike, that you described also for Sports for Nature, that we try to help Sports for Nature signatories in doing that. It's very much about how, what approaches sports are taking. And here I like to think of these 4 Sports for Nature principles on how to protect, what to make sure when sports organizations engage in restoration projects, what to follow, what best practice to follow. And then we heard a lot today already on procurement and of course also on awareness raising. But yeah, I wish it would be easier to answer and give you a quick answer on that, but that's a very important point. I know we're already at the hour. But I want to thank warmly Marcus, Lise, and I know Ali's not on the call anymore, but also thanks to him for his participation today. I very much enjoyed listening to all of your insights. And I want to close today by putting this slide up to see what to share with everyone today online what's following from now. So you see, of course, we have the new publication out on the Sports for Nature. The link is, I think, already in the chat. Thank you very much to my colleague Jana for this. But please have a look, read the publication, reach out to us, comments, questions, anything, we're more than welcome to engage. Then you see the second point. We spoke a lot about the connections, making sure nature and climate are both addressed. Again, I quote, or I maybe misquote Ali here, but think again, positively contributing to one will also positively contribute to the other. And then finally, the last one, of course, if we have representative of sports organizations on the call, if you want to learn more about Sports for Nature, if you consider joining the initiative, we are more than happy and excited to work with you. And of course, welcome any kind of inquiry to see what we can do together so that we can all leverage the power of sports for the good of the planet. With that, I thank you everyone for having joined today's webinar, the first of this Nature Sportified series. And we will let you all know when the next edition comes so that hopefully all of you can join us again. Thank you very much and have a fantastic day, everyone.